Recording in progress.
Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, November 2nd meeting of the Finance Committee. Pursuant to the Governor's June 16th, 2021 Act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Paragraph 20, the Finance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, I will take a roll call of attendance. Ms. Ziemer.
Here.
Mr. Alfred.
Present.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Mr. Robinson.
Here.
And I'm, of course, here. We're missing Ms. Sobchak and Mr. Whitaker tonight. So we just have our complement of 5. Okay, so first up is the administrative stuff, and I have a pile of minutes that I will send out probably within an hour of the conclusion of this meeting. I looked over a bunch of them, but they're going to need, Lisa's been doing a great job producing them. I've been doing a bad job of editing them. And as I said, I talked to Lisa and said to her, start sending them out to the whole committee and just let everybody give you the feedback because, that's the way it used to work. But I have the bunch she already sent me, so I'm going to package those up and send them to all of you for review. But any feedback you have on those, send to Lisa directly. The other thing I'll point out is that some of these minutes will be irrelevant for you, Jay, because they go back to pre your election. So obviously on those, you don't have to review those.
Is she going to use Google Docs? Because then she could just share it and we could all just collaborate off of one document.
Careful there.
Yeah, you got to be careful there because we can't do live editing of the minutes. Yeah, so that's why I said this is why we don't
deliberation. That's considered.
Yes.
All right, got it.
So that's why I've been careful about sending them out. And when I send them out, I said send the feedback back to her so she can incorporate them.
Yep,
so,
I got it. Thank you.
Okay. But that'll be all coming very shortly. And now that we've gotten past the fall town meeting and before we get heavy into FY23, it's a good time to catch up on all these things. So try to make it a priority to look at it between now and our next meeting and catch up on a bunch of minutes. Okay, next up is TA update. I'm going a little bit out of order, by the way, because the school committee has requested that the discussion that we have as second on our agenda take place in executive session. So I'm just going a little out of order to get our open session stuff done first, and then we'll go to executive session and not return from that. So go ahead, Travis.
Okay. Couple things personnel related. The new ATA HR director started yesterday, as did the interim deputy DPW director. I sent out the email address for the ATA to the finance committee because it doesn't follow our normal last name, first initial due to a number of Buckley's unrelated. And so she'll introduce herself soon at some point when it's appropriate to you all. And the only thought that I have, obviously on the DPW side for meeting the interim deputy DPW director for liaisons, I'll sort of work that out for an HR director ATA. There isn't a natural liaison. So we can talk about that and how we want to do it. I think probably more of an FY23 budget conversation if we're going to try to separate HR into its own budget, but that's a discussion to come. Separately discussed last night, I'm trying to schedule on the probably mid to late November timeline finalization of the Stantec reports, separate engineering groups within Stantec, which one is on the sidewalks. They need to accept the report from Stantec and they asked them for some more information. And then on the water side, there was a presentation with draft information, which was used in the October town meeting warrant, but they Stantec, that engineering group, still owes the select board a final report. And then what Mr. Sparrow asked for last night was also confirmation and a handoff of the ArcGIS platform that the Stantec engineering presented to the select board previously. So that's hopefully going to be on the end of November timeframe, and I'll work with liaisons to let people know when I get that scheduled. Last night, the camera policy that had been mentioned for the capital article was adopted. Essentially, what ended up happening was the majority of the sort of meat of it came from a collaboration with some final recommendations from council came in at the end. and incorporated some language that the group liked from the City of Somerville's policy. So that policy was finalized, adopted last night, and is up on the website. The financial policies, let me do at the end, actually. So let me come back to that. DPW recreation, the working group, including 3 liaisons from the Finance Committee for Parks and DPW, have been involved in a working group, including the Parks Commission, the Select Board, and staff, to discuss potentially changing the model of grounds maintenance in town. We had another meeting last week, and if the liaisons, which are Vin, Dan, there's a third one.
Mark. I was going
to say Mark is the quietest, but it was included in the last meeting as well. If they want to update further under liaisons, they can. Otherwise, I found it very productive, and it's really, staff is providing the homework as the group is looking for more information, but continuing to progress there. And the schools were actually involved in this conversation with Cynthia Lestebnik, Dr. Kuska, and Keith involved to sort of be part of that process moving forward, which was very helpful. I'm expecting the DLS tab report this week. I don't have an exact deadline. And then, we'll all be able to hopefully look at it, and hopefully there won't be any need for feedback, and we'll just take it and I'll have time to dissect it, but hopefully this week for that. The OPEB Trust Committee, looking to schedule a meeting for the OPEB Trust Committee in November. Mary Bosquet has sent out some dates to that group. So once I get something scheduled again, I'll update the Finance Committee on that. And then I think, as the chair mentioned, I think next week at your meeting, we'll get into sort of some of the preliminary work on the FY23 budget. So I won't touch on that now, other than, excited to kind of pivot now that we're through October, and I'm already looking ahead. So, all right, just getting back to the financial policies. Last week, I sent out the draft to the Finance Committee and Select Board together. Last night, I got some feedback from the Select Board. My point to them was, last time, and I think it was pointed out by Dan Alfred, that, just because the Select Board took action first last time doesn't mean that the Finance Committee doesn't get a chance to take a look at it. So my point to them last night was, you don't need to take a vote on this draft at the moment. The Finance Committee still needs to discuss it and do that as well. So I got some feedback, but we didn't really sort of finalize any discussion on the financial policies. But you have that draft, they have that draft. And it's really, it's an attempt to incorporate the feedback from the Finance Committee and Select Board discussion on, I believe it was October 4th.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the quickest update I can do.
Okay. Well, I wasn't timing you, so that's fine. Okay. So any questions for Travis on anything that he mentioned? So Travis, just one question I had, and I know this is early, but one thing that, as we get into the budgeting process, certainly all this discussion about the DPW and the parks and all that stuff like that, I'm going to be expecting to see a dollar figure somewhere, right? At some point. Again, I'm not saying you have it now, but I know that there's, some of the feedback I've gotten is the new hires and this and moving things around. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to figure out what that's going to do, what we're going to need to do budget-wise to support that if that's where we want to go.
Yeah, no, I think quite honestly, I mean, I could tell you the cost of an employee pretty easily. I think what the exercise to date has been making sure that the needs and that everybody has an expectation of what a model of 2 FTE plus seasonal, 3 FTE less seasonal, right? What those models would support before we could really determine what would be needed, right? If we're just going to set up 2 people to fail of everybody's expectations, right? I really focused on sort of making sure that we understand the scope, because from a cost perspective, I think I left the meeting saying I have an understanding of the models I can present to the group. Once we're all of people feel like they've received all of the information and understand what we're trying to accomplish. And I think we're almost there and then ready to talk numbers after that.
Yeah. So the only thing I'd say is, please promise me we're not going to see a document that says if the trash is more than 6 inches away from the can, it's DPW, and if it's 3 to 6 inches, it's parks, and if it's within 3 inches, it's schools or something like that. And I'll show you the document I'm talking about. It goes back more than a decade, but it's the dumbest document that was ever produced in the town of Holliston about literally like where litter was located and who's responsible for putting it in the trash can. So that
I think responsibilities will be up. I haven't been measuring in inches where trash will be.
as long as we don't have that document, I think everybody would be happy.
Yep.
So, okay. So any other questions for Travis? Okay. Before we go into executive session, I just wanted to give if anybody had anything they wanted to say, I'm just giving an opportunity for the members if they wanted to raise any issues before we go into executive session, because right now, as I put on the agenda, the plan is when we go into executive session, we will not return to open session. So I just want to make sure everybody's said their piece before we take the vote to move into executive session.
So my only question would be, is there any chance that Ben could be included as well? And the reason I ask is that I think, depending on how we sort of settle this, it may take a whole of Holliston approach, with select board. I didn't realize we were going to do all of this in executive session. I thought we would have some sort of discussion.
Well, I mean, I'm fine with it. Obviously, it's up to the school committee to decide if they want. It's my decision. My decision would be yes, I'd be fine with Ben being there, but ultimately, the school committee has to decide. They should decide, but I don't think it's an issue in the sense that they're bound by the same confidentiality and everything else. So I can leave that up to them to make a statement in that regard. So I don't know if Cynthia or Lisa, you guys care if Ben sits in the executive session as well as part
I
of
have
this
no problem with it. So I'll let Cynthia or Dr. Kuska or Keith weigh in if they have concerns.
Yeah, I would say the same if Dr. Kuska has concerns, but I don't have any objections.
I don't think that there's any problem for it.
Okay, good.
Sorry,
Hey,
Ben, for not letting your night end early.
Right.
Before we step into it, so I'm looking at the agenda. So the full day kindergarten is a executive.
It's the executive session discussion. Yes. The just to be clear for anybody who's watching this at home, right? We have this agenda item to discuss the full day kindergarten and the funding and the plan for funding, and it is and it's not our decision, but the school department has told me that they feel that part of that discussion could potentially impact their ongoing negotiations. And
Okay, so that's how you link 2 and 6. That's the linkage. I'm good.
Yes.
That's clear.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah. So at their request, I'm moving that discussion to executive session, because as you know, one of the 10 reasons for executive sessions that's in the agenda is because the discussion may have an impact on collective bargaining. So, okay, so anybody else have anything before we go into executive session? Okay, I don't see anything going on. So I will entertain a motion to enter executive session for the purposes of discussing strategy with respect to collective bargaining with regards to the school department, and potentially, to be fair, to the school department or the town, because Travis may want to update us on things on their side as well. So
From which we won't return. So moved.
From which we will not return to open session. Correct. Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Hubbard. Do I have that motion?
Dan just made it. I'll second it.
Okay.
Who's going to take minutes during it?
I think that goes to Jay, because he's the guy. He's the fill-in clerk, right?
I'll take minutes. So, because we're not going to record the executive session. So, all right,
correct.
I got you.
Correct.
I'll second it.
Okay. So the motion on the table is to enter executive session from which we will not return. So I need a roll call vote. Ms. Zemer?
Aye.
Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, so that concludes the public portion of this meeting tonight. As I mentioned, we will not be returning to open session. So for those of you who are not part of the executive session, you can drop off now or you'll be removed automatically. But for our viewers at home, thank you and good night.